So my computer went down and I don't know when it'll be back up, but I wanted to share the Good Old Days magazine, the magazine that remembers the best. This is the January-February 2021 issue. Key Connection, those magical phone and power lines. Okay. And they have a story here that phone was not always totally respected. Sometime in the middle grades, I learned about kids who called tobacco shops asking if they had a Prince Albert in a can. And it's the black and white rotary. It was an instant hit by Carla Cooper. And it's a good story. Oh, I'll go ahead and read it. Our family did not acquire a phone immediately after we moved from Grandma's house away from her wall-mounted box telephone. In fact, it took months for us to get a phone line. Autumn air cooled and leaves changed as we settled into our newly constructed home on Spruce Street in Des Plaines, Illinois. Then in the spring of 1949, bulldozers spread topsoil and grass seed on our thawing dirt yard, and truck with workers placed a single elm tree sapling in the out space at the street. Services promised in our purchase. The telephone company soon planted poles and ran lines between the back lots of our post-war suburban house. An elevated single cord connected service to the back of our house through a black wire that trailed down on the outside wall, entered and drilled the hole into the basement, and then snaked upward to the first floor. The day after school, I was about 6 years old. With oohs and ahs, we admired the shiny black phone that sported white numerals on a white circle, the numbers and letters peeking through the rings of the rotary dial. We memorized our new phone number, VA 4-6453, a number that had a kind of rhythm. We wrote it on our official forms and later gave it to our friends during the 10 years before we moved again. At first we shared a party line, a way of common life in the 1940s and 50s. We counted the number of rings to know who should pick up. Our neighbors cooperated concerning phone use, but at some point we needed immediate access and confidentiality that a single line would be provided, so Dad obtained a private line. It served Mom well the year she presided as president of our parish altar at Rosary Society. Our new phone, comparatively heavy in the child's early memory, and resided on a phone shelf Dad attached adult high to the narrow wall between the stairs in the living room and the front hall. Its storage space underneath held our Des Plaines small town thin phone book. Because the phone hung near the stairway, I recall bouncing noisily down the wooden stairs to answer it, sprawling next to the last winding step to gossip with friends, or shouting up to an increasing number of brothers and sisters, "It's for you." Bell Telephone Company acted as a friendly authority with directory assistance and repair. Our parents placed rare long-distance calls through the operator, and those were made solely for important reasons, such as when Dad learned of a death in the family. Back then, most of our communication with distant relatives came through the mail. Handwritten news sent and received postcards, birthday cards, letters that were dropped by the mailman through our front door mail slot on the hall floor. But with the new phone, we could pick up the receiver to chat with friends, make plans to meet at the Park District pool or downtown stores, or complain about parental restrictions, always aware that even if we whispered, anyone near the living room could hear us. Phone use was not always totally respected. Sometime in the middle grades, I learned about kids who called tobacco shops asking if they had Prince Albert in a can. Well, if they did, the caller would reply, "Well, let him out." One day, in a lowered voice, tricking a friend, I pretended to be a master of ceremonies of a quiz show, asking a couple of questions. It was less imaginative, perhaps, but I never thought of pulling pranks aimed at strangers or stores. Unlike that of old-fashioned rotary dial black phones and subsequent parade of various designer and touch phones, cell phones today accomplish almost anything. We can take pictures, search the web, do banking, and even watch movies. Nevertheless, I feel nostalgic about those daily person-to-person adventures we enjoyed back then, especially the extended phone-free times in between calls. Our landline phone didn't demand so much attention because it stayed home. Our cell phones, at times so intrusive, travel with us wherever we go today. They're a modern blessing, but sometimes they're also a pain. It says this is Carla with her brother and mother in the summer of 1949, shortly after their family got their new phone installed. Okay. Okay, they do an Old Lang Syne, which it says, should old acquaintance be forgot, and days of Old Lang Syne, by Georgia Cobart. This is Good Old Days in the Kitchen. In 1788, Scottish poet Robert Burns penned the poem Old Lang Syne. Those words mean old long since or days gone by. Later, Burns' verses were put to the tune that is intertwined with our New Year celebration as a bittersweet ode to people and times we loved that are now gone. At midnight on December 31st, we teeter on the cusp of the year that just passed, bidding goodbye to the known and familiar with nostalgia, yet looking forward with hope and positivity. When I was growing up, our family didn't leave the outcome of New Year's completely to fate. They turned to an old tradition that promised good luck for the days ahead. It was to eat a bite of sauerkraut right out of the can, just as Grandpa's old regulator clock bonged 12 times. In addition to the privilege of staying up late, Dad crowned the festivities when he took down old Bessie, his shotgun, and fired her off at the frosty midnight sky. Shivering with cold and dancing with excitement, we plugged up our ears, squealing at the booms reverberated in the night. Simple times, simple pleasures. Our kids like staying up to watch this Times Square hoopla on television and wait for the glittering ball to drop. Now the nest is empty, and we prefer peaceful observance with a fire crackling on the hearth and an old movie playing. I'm content with some needlework and a purring cat on my lap. While my sisters and I still carry on the sauerkraut tradition, none of us know how and when it began. The belief that pork symbolizes progress and prosperity was brought to the U.S. by German and Eastern European immigrants who prepared it with cabbage or sauerkraut. Crisp and briny, it doesn't have to be eaten out of the can at midnight to be a standout in the New Year's dishes. Here are some celebratory recipes January 1st or any winter day. They have New Year's casserole, cranberry sauerkraut meatballs, sausage link with apple and kraut, oven skillet potatoes, and Kim's whoopie pies. So that's kind of an interesting recipes, if you will. Okay. And we've only got one more thing marked off in this book, if I can get to it. Okay. It's about landline phones again. So it says, Landline Phone Etiquette, Let the Cat Out of the Bag. Who's Calling? By Sarah Egan Baker. It says, receiving an answer, he then yelled at the same terrible volume, It's Robert. He was a name that had never been said aloud before in our house, and that sound of which piqued my parents' interest. Okay. It says, though landline phones may be on the endangered species list, in the 1950s and before, they were the lifeline of communities and a teenager's life. For nearly 100 years, the landline was the way we talked with someone who wasn't in the room with us. The telephone wire plugged into the wall jack, and the phone line ran from the house to the perfectly named telephone pole in the front of our house. From that pole and all its cousins standing along our street, those wires magically found the people we talked with on what was called the telephone. We had only one telephone, a black rotary one, which sat in a built-in phone cubby in the hallway of our Garland, Texas home. There was no digital caller ID, no robocalls or telemarketers intruding in our lives. So when the phone rang, we were excited and curious, not knowing who the caller might be. In truth, the caller couldn't have been just anybody. The caller was usually one of 4 or 5 people who had our telephone number. Morning calls were certain people, probably neighbors, and early evening calls were relatives looking to chat. We didn't want the phone calls before 9 a.m. or after 10 p.m., and we lived in fear of any call after midnight. Father jokingly said we should unplug the phone when we went to bed so that no one would have trouble at night. The phone didn't ring a dozen times a day, and its sound was kind of a minor event. We kids didn't pick up the phone and answer it, nor did we make a phone call without first asking permission. My father, unless he was at home alone, didn't answer the phone because answering it fell underneath the duties of the homemaker. Mother always answered the ringing telephone, and her voice, smiling and simply, said, "Hello?" We all knew in that moment whom she was talking to by the inflection in her voice. We didn't listen to what she had to say, but we knew by her tone what the world was like. After some years, we had another phone, not another line, another phone. When a family achieved 2 phones, it was thought far and wide to be sort of a luxury to have. For example, a phone in the kitchen and another in the hallway By that time we were teenagers. My brother and I were allowed to make limited calls and answer the telephone. I experienced a wondrous landline moment that doesn't exist today. The telephone rang shortly after dinner one spring evening. My brother rushed to answer the phone and said, "Hello." After a moment he hollered loudly enough to notify the entire household, "Sarah, it's for you," a phrase long gone because no one shares a phone anymore. My brother then asked the caller, as he'd been instructed in the phone etiquette, "Who's calling?" Receiving an answer, he then yelled at the same terrible volume, "It's Robert." It was that name that had never been allowed before in our house, and the sound of which piqued my parents' interest. I sprang from my bed and sprinted to the telephone cubby. As I turned the slippery corner, I heard my brother yell, "Sarah, it's Robert, a boy from school." I yanked the phone from him, ignoring his satisfying, smug little grin, and said hello to Robert, the dreamiest boy in the 10th grade. Robert needed to know what time he was picking me up for the sophomore dance. I was tongue-tied and embarrassed, answering him only in monosyllables. "Yes, no, okay, sure, yes, bye." Standing there at the phone cubby in the household with a landline, I knew the news was now public. I had a crush on Robert, and he was taking me to the dance. The village had been alerted. These days, there are no such shared moments like this in our beautiful houses when the phone rings and everyone stops and listens to it ring twice, wondering who the caller might be. Robocalls, caller ID, telemarketers have killed all the awe and curiosity. Cell phones and texting have pretty much made the landline extinct. Yet I yearn for those days of removing the phone headset from the cradle, listening to the dial tone, placing my fingers in the number holes, rotating the dial clockwise, and waiting for that almost magical connection to be made, hearing someone on the other end enthusiastically answer, "Hello?" And it says, here's a flashback fun. Color, that's what's trendy today. So in the 1936 ad for a new style of dinnerware that came in strikingly color of red, blue, green, yellow, or ivory, Fiesta Wave and its Art Deco styling was popular then, and even today in the most collective brand of dinnerware in the U.S. Don't ask me why they put that at the end of the Who's Calling. Okay, and they've got a fun Cuddle Up Songs of Winter, and we're going to do this together here. So let me turn this page over. It says number 1 is Cuddle Up. I'm going to say Cuddle Up a little closer on E, so we're going to do 1E. It says I'm in the mood for love. I'm going to go with that. 1E, 2 D, 3, Love Me. Oh, that's got to be Love Me Tender. And that's number I. 4, Put Your Head on My Shoulder. That's got to be that one, B. 5, I've Got My Love. I think it's I've Got My Love to Keep Me Warm. We're going to go that way. 6, Melody of Love, of course, C. Okay, 7, I Only Have, it's got to be J, Eyes for You. 8, Embraceable, U, so we'll go with F. 9, Be My Love, G. And the last one, Love Me With, we're going to go with All Your Heart, 10. Okay, now we're going to read the answers. So it says, Cuddle Up, the answer to it is E, a little closer. Ooh, I got it right. Number 2, I'm in, should be D, the mood for love. Ooh, I got that right. 3, Love Me Tender. Of course, I got that right. Number 4, Put Your Head on My Shoulder, which is B. And I didn't know if I told you number 3 was I. Number 5, I've Got My Love to Keep Me Warm. That's A, and it's correct. 6 is Melody of Love, and I got that right. 7, I Only Have And it's the letter J. Eyes for you. Ooh, I'm doing good on this. I know my music. 8. Embraceable. And the answer is F. You. Well, the answer is F, but the answer to the question is you. Y-O-U. Okay, number 9. Be my love. Yes, I got it right. 10. Love me with H, all your heart. So again, the answers are E, D, I, B, A, C, J, F, G, H. That was fun, wasn't it? I love this magazine. And it's just a fun, upbeat magazine. So if you can, subscribe to this magazine. You won't regret it. So with that being said, that's all the magazines for tonight.